Today, we're joined by Tim Secker, an ultrarunner who recently completed the Montane Winter Spine Race in 166 hours and 17 minutes. For those who don't know, the full spine race is a 268-mile non-stop race along the Pennine Way, battling extreme cold, snow, bogs, brutal terrain, loads of elevation, and there is plenty of sleep deprivation, all in the heart of winter. Now, Tim isn't a front of the pack ultra runner chasing podiums. He's someone who embodies the true spirit of ultra running: resilience, determination, and the ability to keep going when every part of your body is telling you to stop. He's also in his 50s, proving that age is no barrier to taking on some of the hardest races on the planet. Today, we'll dive into his spine race experience, how he prepared for such a brutal event, what kept him moving through the darkest moments, and what he's learned about training, mindset, and resilience along the way. If you like the pod, please can you give us a review and could you share it on socials, as this will enable us to reach more runners. We hope you enjoy the pod. Tim, welcome to the Trails, Tales and Fails podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I said off air just a moment ago. Since we first exchanged messages about a week or so ago, I'm really looking forward to this for lots of reasons. None more so than I'm in totally the wrong area of the country to go and do any part of the spine. So whilst I know about a reasonable amount of races in sort of the south and the southeast, my knowledge of the spine is still growing. So Tim, a little bit about your sort of background to running or endurance events. How did you sort of get into it, and how long have you been doing it for?
Well, I was quite a latecomer to running. I'm 53 now. I was 53 actually on the day the spine started this year, so I thought that was a sign I might actually finish it. But I started running when I was 45, and my wife challenged me to come on a park run in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is where I live. And I couldn't get around without walking. So at that point, I thought, well, this is poor. I need to get some exercise, get fit. And I've never really been a runner. But then I caught the bug. It caught my imagination. I did the Great North Run because that's again local to me, so it's easy enough. And then I spotted a longer run, the Wall, which is from Carlisle to Newcastle Quayside, which captured my imagination because I love the idea of getting from A to B just with your feet and your fitness and your head. And that was where I started, really. I actually persuaded one of my work colleagues to join me in that event. But this has happened to me a few times throughout my running sort of experiences. People sign up and then they don't turn up on the day, so I ended up doing that one on my own. So that was my first experience, and then from there I got a season ticket for the next year for the sequence of rat race races. I went to the Isle of Arran, did the runs that they have there. I did the Ultra Tour of Edinburgh, which they don't do anymore. I attempted the Wall again the following year, but I'd done the Suffolk Backyard Ultra the week before, and it was silly, really, trying to do another ultra the week after. So I actually pulled up short on that one. And then from there, I just started looking, I suppose, for more challenging races. So the races that really got me prepared for spine type races. There's a fantastic race up here run by Trail Outlaws, which is the Wood Trail Marathon, which is on very sort of spiny terrain, boggy, muddy. It's run in November. The weather's poor, gives you a little taste of what it could be like. And then my qualifying race for the spine race was actually the Cheviot Goat, which you may have heard of, which is a 55 to 60 mile ultra that's run up here in December. It's running the Cheviots, which are beautiful. If you don't know this part of the world, we're very lucky up here. Um, and it's got a decent amount of elevation in it, and it really does give you a proper insight into what it would be like to run the spine race, because that's definitely probably the closest thing you can get to the conditions. It's run partly on the Pennine Way as well. And that was my qualifying race. That's what sort of opened the door for me to sign up to uh, spine race events, because you need to have a sort of certain amount of experience. You need to have run in similar conditions with similar elevation and in similar terrain. So that opened the door for me to sign up to the spine.
Oh, that's amazing. And were you? I know you did Challenger first, didn't you?
I didn't actually. So
Ah,
that's on
okay.
my it's on my records as a DNF, but it was actually a DNS. So it was during the days of COVID, and I had my bag packed, I had my B&B booked, I had my train booked. Did a COVID test because they'd asked us to do that, just to be, ethical and sensible before the race. We weren't putting people at risk. Stepped in the shower, got out of the shower, COVID positive.
Ah,
Couldn't go.
no.
So
That's a
stayed at
shocker.
home.
I mean,
Stayed at home and ate all the sandwiches I'd made for the spine race and ate all the chocolate I'd packed, So
we
to
were having a
console
conversation.
myself.
We were having a conversation about it beforehand, and Rob and I were saying, "Oh, like based on your records, as you say, it does say that it's a DNF."
Yeah.
And we were talking, weren't we? And we said, "Oh, imagine running like a significant distance DNFing and then going, well, next year I'm going to try and run double it."
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you were a do not start, and I wonder if maybe you were a DNF that might have tempted you to not go into the full distance spine. In 2023 was your first one, wasn't it?
Yeah. 2023 was a DNF. That was a DNF at the first checkpoint in Hebden, and you might have heard me speak about this a little bit already, but the my head just wasn't in the right place. The reputation of the spine and the all the publicity and the chat and the hype that goes with it got into my head, and I've just never ever been such a wreck before a race. Whereas really, you've got to consider it's just one foot in front of the other with some elevation, some bad weather. But I just couldn't get my head around it. So year one, 2023, I was looking for an excuse to drop out. I just wanted to come home and have a cuddle with my wife, basically. It was just something I've never experienced before. But yeah, it definitely got the better of me, the reputation of the race. And, they describe it as Britain's most brutal. And I think it is a pretty brutal race, but I managed to get to checkpoint one. I also, a mistake I made that year was I sort of got involved in a group, um, whereas I think you have to run your own race. And I found that sort of messed again with my plan of what to do. And yeah, that was a sort of a learning curve, really, for me.
I think, yeah, what you say is really, really is so valid. I was listening to a podcast that Jack Scott did, who obviously smashed the record last year, and he was saying similar to what you've said. If your head's not in it, and if there's any sort of like weakness, it's such a difficult task. And I think the psychology around um, any ultra, let alone the spine, the psychology element is just massive, because
Yes, yeah.
if you're not prepared and you're not there, and if you're looking for those, oh, I feel like I've got a bit of a niggle, or I'm not feeling 100%. If you're looking for those out, then you're probably not going to finish, are you?
No, yeah, and that was it. And I really at the time, I remember speaking to a medic and saying, "Oh, my knees are sore." I was looking for an excuse, and she was like, "Well, there's nothing wrong with you, really." That's what she was saying. But I was looking for an excuse, and that was my excuse. But really, like in retrospect, when I reflect on it, I know it was just because I was not in the right place for it at all. And what I did differently this year, because it is a race that keeps you awake at night, in the months beforehand, just the prep and the planning, the logistics, the kit choices, trying to think about the strategy. I sort of ducked between being nervous and being excited for the few months before this year's spine. And what I did differently this year, because there's the Facebook group for the spine, but there's also now WhatsApp groups that get set up when you get accepted onto any of the races. And I didn't switch them off, but I stayed off them. I just stayed away from it all because in my head, I knew what my strategy was going to be, loosely. I knew I'd tried and tested my kit. I know what nutrition I like, to eat when I'm out on a long event. So I didn't really need to get stuck, down any rabbit holes basically, because the worst thing I could have done is gone on and then started looking at shoe choices or sock choices or base layer choices and starting to doubt what I'd got, whereas I knew actually it all works.
And it's
Um,
that sort of worry and panic on social media groups. Rob, I don't know if you're on any social media groups relating to races, but I've seen it from the Arc this year. Is like the panic that sets in with certain people
yeah,
is.
Certain people, I think I'm sat next to somebody who is one of those certain people who can be influenced very easily by Facebook groups.
I don't know what he's talking about.
We had a lot of kit changes on the run up to Arc. A lot of kit changes. Do I need this? Do I need that? Should I buy this? I think he had about 6 different jackets he could have picked from.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's an
I tell you what,
excuse, isn't it? It's an excuse to
it
buy
wasn't.
more kit,
It was two, but we'll go with six because it makes a better story. I think what you say is really valid though, and what is so easy to get swept away in it, and then you see like one post, and what it becomes like a domino effect, and then you see all these people posting about, oh no, I hadn't considered this, or what about that, and I think it sounds like your experience has also played a big role in it, but if you're organized and you've practiced all of your sort of process goals and you've trained with all of your kit and you know what to expect in all sorts of conditions and all types of scenarios, then really you're pretty well prepared and you don't need other people necessarily influencing your decisions and your process goals, because actually if you've got it all set up, then and that's probably going to be good enough.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if I was to give advice to anybody who perhaps hadn't experienced this type of race before, I would say the most important thing you could do is test your kit. Test your kit thoroughly, make sure you're happy with your kit. And make sure that you've tried and tested it in similar condition. And that's such an important part of being prepared. I see so many pictures of feet on the internet, and I always wonder, shouldn't these people either buy slightly bigger trainers or check their sock choices, or then it could save some of these horrendous pictures that I see of feet being damaged after ultras.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with your obviously you got to checkpoint 1 2023 then. So 2024, how did that go in comparison? And then obviously what led you from 2024 onto completing the race in 2025?
2024, I stopped because of something that just was not on my radar at all. So um, I was having a fantastic race in 2024, and I was definitely going to finish in my head. We got to checkpoint 2 in sub 48 hours, which is Challenger South. Finished in 47 hours and something. I thought this is amazing. I could literally have the full 8 hours at this checkpoint. Um, But because there was a weather warning, if you remember, the temperature had gone down to something like -19. The ground was hard. It was making movement really quick. There were no bogs. It was fantastic. Bit hard on the feet because the ground was frozen, but in a way, it was an advantage, and I think that certainly helped with the record time last year. Um, but I developed exercise-induced asthma because of the cold weather, which wasn't something I'd anticipated. Um, I've never had asthma in my life. And something that contributed to that was that because of the extreme cold temperature, we all had frozen water, so we were all dehydrated. A lot of people were affected. with a similar problem through the race. But what happened to me was I literally couldn't climb any hills. So as soon as I started climbing a hill, I couldn't breathe. So I was pulled by the medics at the third checkpoint. They'd already sort of checked me out at checkpoint two, and my SpO2 was down in the 80s. So, I wasn't, my lungs weren't performing normally. They'd given me an inhaler, showed me how to use it, 'cause I'd never used one before. But unfortunately, that stopped my race at checkpoint three. The medics basically had a word and said, look, you can go back out. We can't stop you going back out, but you're not just putting yourself at risk, you're putting spine safety team, these volunteers that come and make sure you're safe. You're putting everybody at risk if you go back out. So sensibly, the thing you should do is actually stop at this point. And to be fair, I couldn't move quickly because I couldn't climb very easily, and for somebody who's not asthmatic, um, it was a bit of panic sets in when you can't breathe,
Yeah,
Um,
I've got asthma, so I'd be really interested to just unpick that a bit more. So,
yeah, sure.
I used to have exercise-induced asthma. I still have asthma, like daily steroid inhalers. So yeah, I do get flare-ups, but is it something that settled down, or in your training for 2025 and then the 2025 race, is that something that you still had to manage? And if so, sort of how did you go about managing that?
Yeah, I did manage it for 2025. So um, I that was the only thing that stopped me in 2024. So in 2025, I'd done some research online, as you do, and I found out that the Swedish cross-country ski team have special face masks with a heat exchanger, really simple paper filter, basically, that just warms the breath before it goes into your lungs. So
Hang on a second, Tim. Let me just make a note of this bit of kit for next year's arc. Write that down, add it to the kit list.
it's pretty cheap, we're talking like 40, 50 quid. And when you're looking at a race that's not just expensive to enter, for good reasons, and you've spent a fortune on kit, to buy something relatively cheap and pretty simple to try and combat that this year. And I used it. And whether I needed it this year, I don't know, because the temperatures weren't as low. But I certainly wore it, mainly when climbing, because I think I'm a proper mouth breather, and I think that probably contributed the year before. If I could train myself to nose breathe, I'm sure it wouldn't have been a problem, but I just can't do it. So I used a face mask this year, and fortunately, I didn't have any issues whatsoever in the same way. So yes, that solved it.
I actually think that's also a massive for you. It's like obviously a security blanket, but it's just taking away a layer of anxiety before the race.
Absolutely, I just couldn't have that again, and obviously it's going to be sub-zero temperatures at some point during the race, so it's going to be similar. There were no frozen water bottles this year. I mean, that was a big problem last year, because it was so cold. Um, and to be fair, I bought some insulated water bottles this year, some double-skinned ones, but I didn't need to use them. So they just sat in my drop bag, So I sort of had all bases covered, I think. Um, but yeah, fortunately, I didn't need those. But the face mask certainly worked for me this year. Yeah, it was good.
Amazing. So it's been awesome chatting. I'm honestly so captivated by what you're saying. I think it's brilliant. So should we do the icebreaker questions?
Yeah, I was going to say we don't normally not talk this much, but we're just quite fascinated by all things spine at the moment. So
yeah, 100%.
Better get back on schedule.
Rob, do you want to ask this one?
Yeah, well, so icebreaker question then. So if you could have any celebrity pace you in a race, who would it be and why?
This has created some real chat in our house and with my mates. And I've got such a long list, so really it should be like a group, a running group. But I've got two. So I'd like to take David Beckham because I reckon we could be mates, and he's an uber cool athlete, so he could set the pace. I just think he's a genuinely nice guy, and I'd like to spend a bit of time with him. I know he does charitable things with UNICEF. He's a good cook. I know he's made mistakes in the past, but I think he's a good family man. And then for more in-depth chat and stories, I'd like to take Louis through if that's all right as well. Um,
That's a good
because I
one.
think he's a fantastic podcaster. He's had so many interviews with so many interesting people, and I reckon he'd keep me entertained.
Yeah,
Which one would you pick if you had to do 166 hours with one or the other?
Louis,
yeah, he
yeah,
must
I
just
reckon he'd
have
get a bit
so
grumpy at
many.
some points though.
Yeah, he must just have so many stories.
Yes,
So
yeah, but that would be the entertainment though. That'd be fantastic.
yeah, it would be.
Yeah, yeah, it would be.
So, do you have any guilty pleasures food wise when it comes to running that you don't normally like to share? So, like mine, for example, and yeah, I always get slated for it in the house whenever I make it. Mine's a cheese and bovril wrap. Would be
Uh,
that's like my running snack. Cheese and bovril wrap would be mine.
Mm.
Anything a bit quirky that you take with you on the long runs?
I'll tell you exactly what I take. Mine's very similar to yours. Cheese and salad cream sandwiches, loads of
Oh,
Lurpak spreadable, and it's got to be on. There's a specific Marks and Spencer's sort of long, thin, squishy bun that's just delicious. And then salt and vinegar peanuts, and then Marks and Spencer's flapjack with dairy milk cracked up in a, mix it all together in a bag, and then
so
you
would
can
you
just
go
dip into
savoury
it.
rather than sweet?
Bit of both.
They're both
Bit of
okay.
both. I must admit, I get through the savoury quicker, so the salt and vinegar peanuts really do go well with that
This is
cheese and
why I
salad
can't
cream
run long.
sandwich.
I couldn't run I couldn't run a race this long because I just wouldn't have thought about this sort of food. I would literally just be down the shops, a couple of bags of sweets, thinking I could crack this, no problem. But if you guys running with 15, 20 sandwiches with all sorts of nuts and bits and bobs, a gourmet meal. And then,
I took some chicken pot noodles as well. I mean, because I looked at in the past I've had the expedition foods. So I looked at the calories and I looked at the ratios of this, that, and the other, and then I looked at the pot noodle, which is, £1.20. I looked at the expedition foods, which are £10 each. And I realized actually pot noodles are much quicker to make because there's nothing worse than sitting waiting for your expedition food to sort of rehydrate. And it's got similar calories, so I just took pot noodles this time.
That's my current go-to hot food at an aid station would be pot noodle. If you're lucky enough to have crew, just have it so it's just the right temperature. You barely even need a fork. You can just sink it straight down.
That's it.
Um, oh, great. Okay, Rob, should we talk a bit about the 2025 spine race then?
yeah, so yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before the pod. So you're out on the Pennines Way for pretty much 7 days, which is obviously a very long time to be out. I would argue probably much harder than a lot of the front runners had it to actually be out in the elements and bits and pieces. Um, how was it for sort of sleep deprivation and that sort of thing? Were you sort of trudging along at a sensible pace, getting lots of sleep, or were you sort of one of these that are picking up hallucinations and seeing all
Oh
sorts
yeah.
of things going on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the one thing that nobody can prepare you for is the sleep deprivation. I think on this year's race, I had between total 6 to 8 hours sleep, and it reached a point where towards the end, between Bellingham and Burness, which is it's just a really easy section of the Pennine Way. I was staggering. I was walking with my eyes shut, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your brain will not communicate with your feet properly.
Yeah,
You know you've got to keep going, and it's too cold to sleep. And you're not going to get your bivvy and your sleeping bag out when you know there's a sort of half a checkpoint coming up in a few miles. Um, Hallucinations, yeah, every rock was a dog, every dry stone wall was mountain rescue team or photographers. Saw loads of photographers because you get photographed a lot on the spine as well. A lot of photographers lying in long grass with lenses. I've seen my wife a couple of times. She wasn't there, yeah. And
yeah,
the strangest thing I saw was uh, one of the. I mean, dry stone walls are brilliant for hallucinations. Elephant with a top hat on. It was bizarre. And I looked at the elephant and he looked at me and I just thought that's a dry stone wall. None of them are frightening, but it's just your mind, it just goes nuts when you're lacking that much sleep.
yeah. That must have been
And I
quite
would say it's the one
entertaining.
thing you can't anticipate it. It's impossible to prepare yourself for that.
Yeah, I think it must have been quite entertaining. for everybody else around you as well, just seeing you waving at odd bushes, smiling, posing for photographs, I guess, in the middle of the
Yeah, I
night.
think so. I think so. I think it just sounds a bit made up, but your brain just plays tricks on you, and it's bizarre. You can't explain it really.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
How
it's one of the strangest things.
Yeah, so what so you were talking about obviously getting to the checkpoints for sleep, but obviously you
Mm,
only had 8 hours um
yeah.
over the entire race. Was that a plan beforehand, or did you plan to get more sleep, or what was sort of the general gist of getting your head down and making sure you could last that long?
I would have planned to get more sleep, but the problem is, like, so checkpoint one, I had no intention of sleeping at checkpoint one. There's no way I would have managed to bag any sleep at checkpoint one. I think I was there in, like, I don't know, 16, 17 or something like that. And then it's just a case of sort your feet out, change into some dry clothes or base layers, um, stick everything back on, grab a hot meal, grab a hot drink, and get out as quick as possible. Try not to spend too much time in that first checkpoint. Checkpoint two, I had a decent amount of time. I could have taken the full 8 hours in the checkpoint. So my intention was to get 4 hours sleep, but after an hour and a quarter, one of the guys in the dorm, because it's a youth hostel, was using an egg timer as his alarm clock, and he let it go off about 3 or 4 times. I mean, by that time I was wide awake. So I thought, this is stupid. I could just lie here awake, or I could crack on and go to the next, get on the next stage.
Presumably, when you're thinking about kit to carry, an egg timer
Mm,
isn't, you wouldn't think would be top of the list.
I've seen it in one of the chats. So, I mean, not this year necessarily, but maybe last year, people saying, how do you ensure that you don't oversleep in the checkpoints? Because they do actually say, right, you're going to go to bed now. We're not going to wake you up. If you oversleep and miss the cutoff, that's it, you're out. So it's all off your own back. It is unsupported in that respect.
mm,
Um, but then at the at the third checkpoint, Langdon back, um, which was the limit of where I'd been before in 2024. My intention there was also to try and get about 4 hours sleep. And the problem this time was again, it was a youth hostel dorm, and there was a guy with a head torch wandering around. And it's just like, you can have all the best plans, but what you can't do is anticipate how how disruptive some other people can be,
mm.
you know? And
Yeah.
I'm a terrible sleeper anyway, I'll admit that. But so it became difficult. And then obviously the closer I got to the back of the field, the closer I got to the cutoffs, the more difficult there wasn't a lot of time in the checkpoints. So I tried bivvying down in Dufton, but it was far too cold to be outside. I think I managed half an hour and just woke up shivering. And I think at Alston, I had an hour and 40 minutes, and that was a really decent sleep there, actually, and that probably set me up as much as it could for the end of the race. But there was a point where I'd sort of paired up briefly with a guy called Heine from Denmark, which you might have seen if you were dot watching, and we just sat next to a tree and got set an alarm for 20 minutes, because if you staying still for more than 30 minutes, you get in trouble with the spine safety team. So we just set an alarm for 20 minutes, middle of the night, cold wind blowing, just huddled under a tree, grab 20 minutes sleep. You just got to get what you can when you can get
Mm.
it, basically. But yeah, the sleep deprivation, I would say, for anybody that hasn't done a race like that, that's the hardest thing, I think, actually, because it slows you down. You become sort of inefficient when you're that tired.
Yeah. You've mentioned a few things already, obviously frozen bottles, asthma, breathing, and obviously the cold. How dangerous is the spine to anyone that hasn't really looked at the race? And are you briefed? I mean, what sort of things do they tell you? What things have you experienced that you maybe weren't expecting when you're out in
I
the race?
I think the nice thing about the spine is that you you I've done long recce's on my own this year. And I thought, this is me going out for 24 hours overnight in December on the parts of the Pennine way up here that I just wanted to recce and make sure I knew, or do bits that I hadn't actually seen before and make sure that I knew it. So that even when I was sleep deprived, I wouldn't necessarily take a wrong turn or get lost, or try not to anyway. Um, but the nice thing about when you're actually on the spine is, people are watching you. If you're static for more than 30 minutes, the spine safety team will either ring you or they'll come and find you. And they might penalise you if you haven't informed them that you're just having a snooze. But people are watching you, and I would say it's a safe race. As but I think, because the qualifying criteria are quite strict as well, you've got to have the right experience to do it. And if you've got all the correct kit, um, and you know how to use it, I think it's pretty safe actually. I mean, the worst scenario I always think in my head is, I've got a tracker, I can press the panic button if I need to. I've got all my kit. The worst scenario would be if something happened to me, I get my sleeping bag and my bivy bag out, hunker down, press my emergency button, and somebody will come and find me. So that's the
Mm.
worst scenario. I think at the end of the day, I do think it's a safe race. Um, and I know occasionally in the past, Mountain Rescue have had to get involved to rescue runners, but I think that's quite unusual.
Yeah. Doing a lot of long runs. I mean, obviously we've done sort of 100 miles, 100k, that sort of distance, and generally speaking, there is some point during the race where you just start to question your life choices. Why are you doing this? Why on earth did I sign up for something like
Yeah.
this for fun? Did you sort of hit that moment during the spine? And did anything sort of stand out from that?
Yeah, I had that feeling once on the spine, one particular moment when I'd left Dufton. Um, well, I just said I tried to bivvy down there, couldn't really get much sleep. It was too cold. Um, bit of a morale boost was that the post box pantry in Dufton said they were going to stay open for all the spiners, to provide hot food and drink. And I got there and it was shut.
Oh, no.
So I know, and I was like, "Oh no, God! I'm probably the only person that they shut the door for." And I mean, obviously, I realised that they're not usually open in winter anyway, and it's fantastic that they do open for the spine. So I ended up going to there's a half a checkpoint in Dufton where you're allowed to stay for half an hour. So I just went there, got warm, got a hot drink, uh, rehydrated a little bit, had some snacks, and then moved on up onto Crossfell. Um, but the section before that on Hike Up Nick, I'd really had a bit of a wobble. But that's the one place where you don't have any phone connection. There's no GPS in that area. It's the one place you're actually not allowed to bivvy down because nobody can keep an eye on you. So that's the one location. And at that point, I thought I'd ring my wife, and of course, no phone connection. And I'm also very lucky. I've got a fantastic running coach, Ronnie Staten, and he said, "Look, any point during the race, because he did it last year, if you need me, ring me." So I thought I could ring Ronnie, I could ring Marianne, my wife, and so that was the only point I had a wobble. Now, usually I find on a race, if I have a wobble, if I can get some sort of caffeine into me, it perks me up. It gets me a bit excited again. So at that point, I had a couple of sort of emergency caffeine gels, a couple of goo caffeine gels, high caffeine ones, the ones with double caffeine in. So I had those, and then that seemed to sort me out. But that was a bit of a slog, that bit, and that was the only time I really had a proper wobble.
Yeah. Any memorable people, characters that you met along the way in aid stations? Obviously, you've mentioned a few that helped you out, but any sort of comical characters that you sort of?
Comical characters. Well, I mean, there's some proper characters on the Spine Race. So I would say the volunteers are amazing. If you go into a checkpoint, nothing's too much trouble. As you come up the road to a checkpoint, there's somebody outside to greet you, usually, and they'll tell you what's on the menu, and they'll actually take your food order. Somebody else comes and takes all your wet kit and sticks it in the drying room as you enter, and then your drop bag's waiting for you, and they're just like, right, what's your plan of action? We'll feed you. Do you want to shower? Are you going to go to sleep? And it's fantastic. The volunteers, because they are volunteers, are absolutely fantastic on the spine. And then the other group that's there that keeps popping up from time to time, especially when you're near things like Hadrian's Wall, is the spine safety team. They come and they'll bring you, they'll be waiting with some hot water, so you can get a coffee. And that's lovely. And I know it's mainly unsupported, but once in a blue moon when somebody's bringing you bit of cake, bit of walnut cake I had on Hadrian's Wall from one of the Stein team. Lovely lady called Debbie actually, and she'd brought a whole walnut cake and some coffee, and she was waiting on Hadrian's Wall for us. You know, so there's some fantastic people. Some of
Mm.
the characters that you'll know, Lindley Chambers, who's in charge of the kit list, and he does the challenge running. That's his company down south, down in sort of East Anglia way, isn't it? He's he's a fantastic character. I know him from doing the stuff at Backyard Ultra, and he came to see me at a couple of the checkpoints, and then he was waiting at the finish as well, so that was nice. And then there's a guy called John Bamber who's in Greg's Hut making noodles. You may have seen him if you've seen the documentary, and he sticks like his own homemade chili whack he calls it, and he's got a little spoon that he puts that in your noodles. Um, so he's there just as you get off the top of Crossfell. He's there in Greg's Hut, which is a bothy, with a team of people, and they're there to give you like a nice hot drink, stay for half an hour, have some noodles, and then push on to the next checkpoint. You know, so there's some just fantastic people. There was a guy in Bellingham called Tim who was in charge of the checkpoint, and he could see I was struggling to do my shoelaces up, so he was practically about to do my shoelaces. You know, that was a almost the end of any dignity I had left nearly went out the window at that point, and I could feel him hovering, waiting to do my shoelaces because he was obviously getting frustrated watching me do it. And I was like, I just couldn't let you do it. You know, I had to do my own shoelaces. So, but yeah, I mean, they're just some fantastic people. And then you see some of the messages afterwards on the, people are messaging you on your tracking link as well. And when I spoke to my wife 2 or 3 times during the race, she was just reading out some of these lovely messages from people.
Mm.
And she told me there was a pub called the Red Lion. Just as I was getting near to the end, I rang her just to ask where the Grim Reaper was because I knew that I was close to the slowest ever finisher. And I was looking, I was wanting to know where I was in relation to that. And she said that there was one message from a pub called the Red Lion Pub. Don't know where it is, and it's they'd obviously been watching it on the big screen or something on a Friday night
Mm.
or Saturday night, and the message said the whole pub just erupted as you overtook the Grim Reaper. So there's just
That's
some lovely
brilliant.
things that go on, you know. And I
Yeah.
think because I was at the back, I seemed to attract just a lot of attention, you know, just by being the back marker. Because I think the front runners are fascinating. You know, I've dot watched in the past, and I just love seeing what's going on at the front and just guessing, trying to guess what's going on, really, because you don't really know.
Mm.
And I think the middle of the pack sort of gets forgotten, really, you know, and I think then people start focusing on who's at the back and whether they're going to make it. So I think that's where I picked up. Oh, sorry, that's where I picked up some sort of attention, which I'm not used to at all.
Yeah, you get some really great sort of dot watching. I think we've seen that quite a lot at the Centurion races down in where you get these just unbelievable scenes at the end where someone just scrapes in. I think
Yes,
quite
yeah,
recently we've had one where someone just missed it by a couple of seconds, didn't we, at the end of a 100 miler, and
yeah.
it's gut wrenching. So it can be more exciting at the back.
But I mean,
Um,
there are people in the past who've missed this. I mean, they've finished the spine, but they've missed the cutoff. You know, and
yeah,
that must be horrendous. You know, because you'd almost feel like that's unfinished business, and you've got to go back and do it again.
yeah, exactly,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and I know a couple of runners were removed. I think from Hut 2 or finished at Hut 2 either last year or the year before, and that again, that's got to be horrendous because you'd really feel like you got unfinished business there, wouldn't you?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. We mentioned about obviously shoelaces. Should we get onto feet? We have quite
Yeah.
extensive chat about feet on this podcast. We
Uh-huh.
talk to all things that nails falling off, making necklaces of them, and all sorts of things like that.
You may not have heard this. We've got somebody who knows it's somebody who's friends with somebody who's done lots of ultra marathons, and um, her nails they've been on TV. Her nails have fallen off, and they've been set into a coaster and labelled.
Wow.
Any thoughts to do that after the spine or?
Um. No.
how
No.
what
Well, I mean,
feet?
you put the thought there now. I mean, it's a possibility, but
Yeah, well, how many nails are you losing at the moment? I mean, I think there were about six in there, so you might be on for it if you've got enough falling off.
they're looking pretty black, but I haven't actually lost any yet. But not as far as I know, because my feet are still a little bit numb, which I think I mentioned before. But Yeah. I mean, my toes are numb. That's
Mm.
the strangest thing. My toes are still numb at the minute, and my left hand, some of the fingers on my left hand are a little bit numb just from using the poles, so much. But I know that's going to come back. It's just going to take a bit of time. Um, my strategy with my feet um, was to just load them with Sudocrem, which caused a bit of interest in the checkpoints because I'd get some gloves on, some nitrile gloves, biggest pot of Sudocrem you've ever seen in your life. Um, and new socks at every checkpoint. So 6 pairs of Injinji toe socks, and then the waterproof deck shells over the top, which is a really common combination on the spine race. But really, like my feet were white with Sudocrem, which had tables of people stopping to turn to look to see what I was doing, and it just works for me. I'm not saying it would work for everybody, but it works for me. And when I took my shoes and socks off at the final checkpoint at the finish, everybody was quite surprised that my feet were in such good condition. Having said that, I do have several black toenails, so at some point possibly I may lose some toenails.
Did you keep the
Um,
same shoe size throughout the race, or did you go up as your feet started to swell?
I'd already gone up a size, and I- over the past 3 years, I've done a bit of research on on what works best on the various terrain for the spine. And this year I started in some Hokum Mafate Speed 4s. They're just so comfortable.
Yeah,
They've
I
got
rate those.
decent grip.
Oh, they're just so comfy to wear, aren't they?
Yeah. So on day one, I twisted my right ankle to the point where I thought, I can't believe I've just done that. It's literally 5 hours in. And I totally bent it backwards on, I'm just saying how good my shoes were, but I actually slipped on a wet rock. And my right ankle just went in completely the wrong direction to the point where actually I was trying to run it off for about half an hour. I thought this could potentially be race ending. And then I continued to, for whatever reason, it's typical, isn't it? But when you've twisted something once, there's a little bit of weakness, so you tend to keep twisting it. And over the next 24 hours, I kept sort of like nudging it or damaging it or banging it or twisting it again. So at checkpoint two, I'd actually changed into some Innovate boots, the G400s, and because I used those for the spine last year. And that was a mistake. I went straight back to the Hokers at the next checkpoint, because they're just fantastic shoes, and significantly more comfortable um, than the boots that I swapped to. But I just thought I need to protect that ankle, because potentially if I twist that again, that's going to stop me. But it was a mistake, so I went back to the Hokers. They were fantastic.
Hmm. Yeah. We kind of touched on it, I guess, with the people that kind of didn't make it. Obviously, you've had two attempts at the full spine, and you made it this time. What I guess, what point you sort of said earlier on that you knew you probably would have finished in 2024. So my question was, I suppose, what point did you know you were going to make it, or did you kind of know you were going to make it the entire time, provided nothing went wrong? And then what were your emotions once you got to the finish line? Yeah, I'm very interested in that because I think I'd probably have to have a little cry. I think.
I'm surprised I didn't cry actually at the end. I can honestly say, no point during the race did I think I'm not going to finish.
Hmm.
And that's not because I was being arrogant, because I was probably, if I'd been dot watching, I should have been worrying about whether I was going to finish or not with the cutoffs. Um, but at no point did I think, right, I can't do this anymore. I need to stop. I need to give up. I never thought about dropping at any checkpoints. I never entered a checkpoint thinking that's it, I've had enough. Um, and that is something that has happened to me on races in the past. But yeah, I genuinely thought I'd cry when I hit that finish line. Um, but I wasn't expecting so many people to be there. I wasn't expecting to be interviewed at the finish line. That was a surprise. And I think because I was so sleep deprived, and there was, it was such a lovely feeling to cross that finish line. I tried to kiss the wall and my head torch was in the way, so I couldn't get it. So,
So
um,
tired, you're just going for a
so, so
headbutt.
there's a video of me like with big lips trying to kiss the wall, but my head torch is in the way. And it's just such a fantastic feeling to have your family that you haven't seen for a week there as well, and to know that you finished it. I genuinely don't think it's really sunk in yet, because
Mm.
I've been thinking about this. I used to dream about running along the Pennine Way for the past 2 or 3 years. It's really captured my imagination, the Spine Race. Um, and yeah, finished it finally. So I'm pleased with that because what I really wanted to know. I mean, I followed the Spine Race from I don't know 2017, 18, something like that. Captured my imagination with people like Ian Keith and Jasmine, of course. Paris came and ran it, so that was fantastic.
Mm.
And then more recently, obviously Damien Hall and John Kelly and um, it's just and Jack Scott, of course, last year. And it's just such an interesting race. I think it's just such an iconic race. And I'm just a very normal guy, so I just wanted to see if a normal person with a bit of decent training and just putting one foot in front of the other, is it possible to finish it? And I think, I've just shown that it is.
I'm going to stop you there and say I wouldn't say you're a
No,
normal
I
person.
think we were both thinking that. I think if you were, then you've just moved out of that category.
And I'm saying this like in a very positive way, like to have that drive to keep coming back, to put the training in and the mental resilience required to do the spine, I think firmly puts you in the category of superhuman. So regardless of time, that's just epic. So you sort of said about uh, the emotions crossing the line. Do you think now that you're able to sort of close the lid on it, or do
Yeah.
you think you would be tempted to go back or done?
I mean, never say never, but one of the things this year was that my wife said, right, if you don't finish it this year and you want to do it again, I'm not going to be. I'm going to take a week's holiday, or you need to find a new Mrs. Secker. And every time I went into a checkpoint, I said to the guys, I've got to finish it this year because Mrs. Secker says, like, this is your final attempt on new Mrs. Secker. And I actually quite like my wife. So that was a standing joke all the way through. And I think that, she's right, though. You can't just keep DNF in a race. You can't just keep going back and not doing the job. So I might be tempted. I'd quite like to do the summer one just to see what that's like, perhaps. That's a possibility. I don't think I'm going to be one of those people who needs to go back every year and
Mm.
keep doing it because parts of it were horrendous. You spend most of your time looking at your feet because a lot of the trail is quite technical. You spend a lot of time with wet feet despite your waterproof socks. You spend a lot of time wading through mud this year, like just snow and ice and, almost being hypothermic at some points and recognizing that and trying to, change your layers while the wind's just blowing you over, to stay dry and warm. Um, so I think I've closed the lid on it. Yeah, genuinely.
Okay, 2027. Um, so yeah, we normally do this towards the beginning and then we reveal the answers at the end. But I think we've been too captivated by what you've had to say. So I did send you a little heads up in advance. Have you got two truths and a lie for us?
Yeah, I have. When I was 17, I passed my driving test without my seatbelt on. Um, when I was a bit younger, in 1986, at Nebworth, I attended Queen's last ever concert. And I used to be a gymnast, and I can still do the split.
Oh, that's hard.
So initially, I'm thinking we may as well do the answers now.
Yeah.
But initially, I'm thinking the splits almost seems too unlikely that I'm thinking it must be true.
Oh, yeah. I think you look like someone who could appreciate Queen. So I think that's got to be true.
You locking that in? You
Yeah.
locking in?
Go,
Okay, you go for it.
last. I'm locking that one in.
So Rob can do his and I'll do mine, and then you reveal who's the winner.
Well, I'm gonna say that I didn't get clocked in my driving test doing 10 miles over the speed limit. So I'm gonna say that driving instructors aren't necessarily the most observant people. Oh, don't want to be insulting, but I mean, for me, doing the splits is an impossible task. I think if I'd rather take on a 100-mile run than be forced to do the split. So I'm going to say that's a lie. I'm going to say yeah, true on the driving test, and true that you saw the last. Was it the last ever
Last ever
Queen performance?
concert,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Queens.
Okay, so I'm going to just to be different from Rob. Well, actually, it's not just to be different because I said I
Well,
thought
famously, yeah, because you'll get all these right. Famously, I always get these wrong. So it's...
I'm going to go. I'm going to go with the Queen one as being the lie.
Oh, have I just insulted you by saying you're really old? I don't know. I never played the Queen.
I told you I was 53, so
Oh, I don't know. My maths might
So,
be up there.
so which one's
so
the lie?
I would have been 14 in 1986. So yeah, I am quite old.
Oh,
You're not that old.
yeah, I don't.
No, you're not that old.
Would you have got into a Queen concert at 14?
You can do anything back in 1986, can't
I
you?
suppose so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sticking with my answers.
Okay,
Okay, Rob's right.
Oh,
Can't
come
even
on! That's the first time.
that is
can't
it.
even I
Since
can't
we've
even
been
touch
doing
my
this podcast.
I can't even touch my toes.
That's literally like the equivalent of Rob running 100 miles and finishing is getting one over me on the on the two truths and a lie.
Yeah, that's it. I can just. I don't need to do any more now. That's it.
Oh, so you said you can't touch your toes. So let's talk a little bit about training. So
Yeah.
let's start off with this is a super long race. If you could just choose one top tip, the best tip that you were given for the spine, which one would it be?
Learn to touch your toes.
It's some really good things. Can I have two?
Yeah, you can have two, no more than two.
The best tip I would give somebody to run
Yeah.
the spine.
Well, one the best tip that you were given, and then we can talk about what you would say to somebody else later on.
The best tip I was given is definitely recce the route.
Yeah, it's pretty popular.
You've got to check the route out, and you've got to check a variety of you've got to check a fair bit of the route out because there's so many different types of terrain. You've got slabs, you've got boardwalk, you've got mud, you've got some really technical rocky terrain. Yeah, it's important to to recce the route,
Yeah.
definitely,
No,
because most of the time you see it's dark as well.
Yeah.
So you need to check that you know how to use your GPS, and you need to make sure that you've at least studied, a part of the route with definitely different terrain,
Yeah.
and that leads on to probably the next thing, which is like testing your kit. Sorry, I know you said I could only have one, but you've got to make sure that your kit is suitable for the variety of conditions and terrain that you're going to encounter. And when you're wrecking, you should be doing that with full kit as well, because you can't anticipate how you're going to feel when you're carrying that weight on your back as well. So, and I know it's not a lot of weight because you can really trim it back. But I think it's really important to make sure that you're actually, on the course in similar conditions at a similar similar time of year with full kit, full spine
Yeah.
kit.
Yeah, no, that is really, really important. I think that is applicable to most of the longer races, especially if you're running anything technical or you're running at night. Getting out there and wrecking and training with full kit is so important.
Yeah. So I mean, Sorry,
yeah,
go on.
go on. No, sorry, carry
I
on.
was going to say what I did different this year. One of the things that I think really helped was, and I touched on it earlier, twice, 2 weeks running just in December. I just got my wife to drop me off on a Monday night after work, took the Tuesday off, and just dropped me on the Pennine Way at bits where I'd maybe struggled with navigation last year and the year before. And just overnight, just go for it, see how far I could get, and then get her I mean, she's fantastic support. Come and pick me up the next day when I'd had enough, basically. And I think that was just something that gives you the confidence in everything I've mentioned before, you know, in your navigation, in your kit, in your GPS, and really gives you the confidence to, um, you know, it gives you the confidence to actually think, you know, that you've put some really good preparation in, you know, for that type of race because very similar conditions in terms of the length of the night, you know, so it sort of gets you used to that, and very similar conditions in terms of weather, and how the ground's going to be in January. You know, although we couldn't really anticipate the snow this year, but you know, that's one of the things that I think made a big difference this year for me finishing.
You can run ultras into your like 50s, 60s. We have somebody in our area that does some of the Centurion 100 milers. He's like mid 70s.
Oh, Ken.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great. You can, you know, age is pretty much no barrier. But I think, you know, like I'm certainly noticing it sort of as I approach 40, you know, things take longer to recover, things start to niggle a bit more. When you're training for this sort of event where you've got to do a lot of high volume, how did you manage the training without injuring yourself?
Um, well, as part of my preparation, and I know it's not got a lot of elevation in it. I'd signed up to the Autumn 100 just for the endurance more than anything, and I was actually injured, so I had to stop in that race at about 30 odd miles, I think it was.
Mm.
But I sort of knew going into it that I had some niggles, and you know, I discussed it with my running coach Ronnie, and you know, I thought I'd give it a go and see, you know, how it went. But I knew I was going to do some damage if I continued. And then the problem for me really was then I needed to do the training for the spine, but also that injury or that niggle just lingered until about December, and then finally it cleared up. So that was quite nice actually. But I think one of the biggest differences to me is that when I first started running ultras, I just bought some books and followed the training plans in the back and got myself like a year planner and just penciled it all out. And you know, I think one of the biggest differences to me has been getting a proper running coach, you know, and I know you coach, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think having somebody who is on the same wavelength and who last year came up and we did some stages of the Pennine Way together made a massive difference to me, and it makes you accountable as well. You know, so if I'm not following my training plan, then I feel like I'm letting not just myself down, but my coach down. And that's made a big difference to me. Something I think has made a huge difference to me as well is I do a lot of spinning in the gym, and I really think that's made me a better climber. And yeah, I've Googled it. I've had a look on Google, had a little bit of research, and it says, yeah, spinning's good for runners. But for me, I've noticed a big difference actually with doing spinning 3 or 4 times a week. It's made a big difference to my strength, in terms of climbing, you know. So that's something else I've noticed.
And also as
Um,
well, that's low impact. So, you know, more cycling is less time on your feet, which results in less impact on the joints, which reduces the risk of injury as well.
Absolutely. You know, but I mean, in the past, I've been a bit clueless when it's come to training, you know, and I think I've done okay off my own back, just sort of, you know, trying to follow some sort of formula that I found somewhere. Yeah, but you know, just to have somebody who is qualified and who knows, you know, what you should and shouldn't be doing, and you know, probably I would think my training plan is probably age appropriate as well, you know, because I am 53. You know, things do take a little bit longer to heal, and I can't run as fast as I used to. Um, but I think that's made the biggest difference to me, if I'm being honest.
So, on the subject of running, then, what is the balance between hiking and running, sort of both in training and in the race? So, um, yeah, what does the sort of running and hiking split look like between the two?
Um, I mean, in training, I think for the spine race, because there's a lot of running on day 1 and 2, and the spine race. After that, it's a long distance walk, really. But there's points in the race where it's, you have to cross the A69 at one point. That's a very busy dual carriageway in the northeast. And I tell you what, it's surprising how fast you can sprint when you need to, because that's a few hundred miles in that one. And you can see the traffic coming. And I was surprised, sleep deprived. Tim can sprint across a dual carriageway when he needs to, so it's incredible how you can perform when necessary. But there's not a lot of running after day two. And if in my head, I always thought, right, if I can do about 2.5 miles an hour, when I'm moving, it sort of dropped down to about 2 miles an hour at the end. Then, that's going to get me to the finish in time. So, I've got these calculations in my head. I mean, everything goes out the window. Your strategy goes out the window once you get sleep deprived and, you get further on into the race. But, it's good to have that strategy there.
So would
But
you? Right.
sorry, in training, it's a mixture of running and a lot of hiking. And I'm quite lucky here. I can get out to the Cheviots in Northumberland National Park. I did a lot of training on Crossfell because that's not too far from here. And that's the highest point of the Pennine Way as well. So that's about an hour's drive from here. So I nip off on a Saturday morning, which is when I tend to do most of my long runs. And it doesn't interfere too much with family time because my wife volunteers at um, charity in town that feeds the homeless on a Saturday morning. So she does that. I get up early, go off and do my thing, and then I can be back, when she comes back from doing that on a Saturday morning, which is nice. So it doesn't impact too much on family time. Because one of the things I find quite difficult is balancing what is a really selfish, sort of self-indulgent hobby, because nobody in my family really runs. So it's something I've sort of chosen to do on my own. So sometimes it feels quite selfish, and so that's something I struggle with from time to time, just, realizing that actually I'm just doing this on my own. It's not a team sport, is it? So I like to try and reduce the impact on the family as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's not a team sport, and in some ways it really isn't a team sport, but then in other ways it really is. And you've touched on how supportive your wife is, and I suppose there is that sort of indirect team element which enables you to be able to make it happen, is her support and her, like, dropping you off and picking you up. So
Yeah,
certainly in our household we both run. um Sarah is definitely the runner, but I think, as you say, it's selfish, it's self-indulgent, but I think to make it work, you do definitely need to have that behind the scenes teamwork, don't you? Would you agree with that, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can joke all over the place, but yeah, you've really got to have an understanding partner when it comes to doing ultra runs, especially with something like the spine race. But yeah, I don't know if you get this a lot, but it's a long-standing joke with my partner that I have to sort of earn the time in races via chores and DIY. So yeah, we've sort of got a list of things that allow a certain amount of time. So generally speaking, it's shelves and bits and pieces and sheds. So we've got a lot of sheds and shelves up in our house.
excellent.
If it
Shelves
was,
to
if
put
it
your
was,
shelves to put your trainers on.
Yeah.
if it was a spine, though, what would you have to do for the spine?
Oh, I think it's probably a 2-story extension, I think.
I am very lucky actually. My wife is very supportive, and I probably worry about that far more than she does. But I do like to keep the balance with family time. That's important, I think.
Yeah. So if somebody was thinking about running the spine for the first time, what one piece of advice would you give them? Because you said, like, maybe it could be, I'm thinking it could be getting a coach, could be wrecking. What would you go for as being the most valuable piece of advice?
I would say most important piece of advice is thoroughly test your kit and recce the course. I know that's 2 bits, but
That's fine.
thoroughly recce. So I know we've touched on it already, but
Yeah.
thoroughly test your kit and recce the course. And test it with full spine kit.
Hmm.
That's the most important thing.
Awesome. I agree.
Genuinely, yeah.
Definitely. So you sort of said you're not going, or you're not looking to go back to spine as a yearly thing. So if you could do one more race for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
I might contradict myself a little bit here, but either the Lakeland 50, because it's such a lovely race, and it's so well organised. And again, the volunteers and the checkpoints are fantastic. It was such a lovely race. Did it for the first time last year, and it was brilliant. Can't fault it. Or Challenger North because I prefer the northern part of the Pennine Way, and then you get the lasagna at Alston, which is just fantastic. You know, and they'll keep spooning that in for you. You can have as much of that as you want, and it's just
Mm.
fantastic. You know, it's just what you want when you get to that point of the race.
Oh, amazing. Oh, would you consider doing any races abroad? Like, have you got any, in an ideal world, if you could choose to do one race abroad, have you got
I am.
a bucket list race?
I don't know if this. I don't know if this is the right race for me because I don't know if I'm a cold weather racer or you know I tend to struggle a little bit more in heat. Um, but I've signed up to the GTC 100, which is like a warm up race for the Tour of Giants, just to see because it's in Courmayeur in July, just to see how that goes. But after I'd signed up, I realised there's 7,900 meters of elevation, so in 100 kilometers. So I'm anticipating that's going to be a little bit hilly,
Yeah,
with a 30-hour cutoff. Um,
Oh, that's quite tough. Yeah.
yeah, so I haven't booked a hotel yet. I've signed up, but I haven't booked a hotel yet, but we'll see. I
yeah,
think my biggest problem there may well be the altitude and dehydration. Um,
yeah. Try and get out there
Mm.
yeah, but I thought,
beforehand.
it's you know, it's potentially if you complete that, then you sort of get a better opportunity to sign up for the Tour of Giants. Um, so yeah, that's on my radar.
Amazing.
Yeah, all that from a park run in Newcastle.
From a park run 8 years ago in Newcastle that I didn't want to go to. In fact, my wife said, "I'm going to park run. Are you coming?" And I said, "Nah, I can't be bothered." And she said, I bet you couldn't do it." And I went, "Right, I'm coming then." And I couldn't do it.
That's it.
Um, you know, and then it started from there.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
Well,
it's one hell of a story.
we have absolutely loved chatting to you. I mean, I've been totally captivated in everything you said from the minute you started talking about it. As I said, I've been excited all week to have this conversation. So excited. In fact, I was glad that we recorded on a Wednesday and not a Thursday, so I didn't have to wait an extra day. I think that your sort of journey in, what is a relatively short period of time to be going and doing sort of 268 miles in Britain's toughest race is phenomenal. So yeah, it's awesome and very, very inspiring. And thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much for the invite. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been great.
Yeah, it's been really good. I'm still terrified of the spine, but one day I might brave it.
I would, I would do it. I think, it's just such a fantastic race. I know it's just won an award for being Race of the Year, hasn't it? And I think that's probably really well deserved because I think it's so well organised. But what makes such a difference is just what they call the Spine family, the volunteers, and I've mentioned it already, but everybody who's associated with that race is just fantastic. I mean, down to the media team and the photographers. There's just a fantastic photographer called Andrew Hendry who's just lovely, and you meet him around the course, and he's been taking the photographs for years. There's a Spine media team because their media coverage is fantastic, isn't it? It keeps everybody updated. But the volunteers and the volunteers on the Spine safety team are just brilliant, and they really look after you. So I'd definitely recommend it. You'll not regret it. If you go and try one of the Spine races, you definitely won't regret it.
Well, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, me and Max will sign up 2027.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for chatting, Tim.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.